Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a stubborn HOA president with a clipboard and a grudge accuses her neighbor of assault, one man finds himself cuffed on his own porch for a crime he didn't commit. But she didn't count on one thing: a security camera, a loyal neighbor, and the truth that bites back. It started with a knock, not the kind of knock that says, "I'm here to talk," but the kind that carries an air of entitlement. You know, sharp, rhythmic, the kind that hits your front door like it owes them money. I opened it to find the usual suspect, Karen. Now, if you've ever dealt with an HOA president who thinks she's the sheriff of a town that doesn't legally exist, you know the type. Tight ponytail, clipboard, sunglasses, even though it's cloudy. She wore that HOA badge like a damn FBI credential, except her jurisdiction didn't include my house. I lived just outside the HOA boundary, legally, technically, spiritually, and she hated that more than I hated her monthly unsolicited compliance suggestions. "Mr. Bennett," she said, already annoyed I hadn't greeted her with a curtsy. "We need to discuss the visual impact of your property on the neighborhood." I leaned against my door frame, arms crossed. "You mean my lawn? Or the American flag? Or maybe the no trespassing sign I had to install because some people can't take a hint?" She pursed her lips. "Your decorative choices, especially the paint on your garage door, violate the aesthetic standards set forth by Spring Ridge HOA. "Karen," I interrupted, "this house isn't part of Spring Ridge. You've seen the survey. You've had your lawyer send me that passive-aggressive letter. I even let you take a copy of the title deed when you demanded to verify it. You remember that part, right? When I wasn't a member." "That's debatable," she snapped. "Your proximity impacts property values, Mr. Bennett, and frankly, your tone is..." "My tone is what it is because this is my property. I mow my own lawn, I fix my own roof, and I don't answer to a woman who thinks petty tyranny is a lifestyle." Something behind her eyes twitched. I'd seen it before. That crack in the HOA mask. The part where frustration meets ego and starts calculating revenge. She stepped forward, crossing the threshold of my porch. That's when I put my hand up. Not on her, not even near her. Just up. As in, back the hell off. "Please get off my property," I said flatly. She staggered backward with all the theatrical flair of a daytime soap star, then suddenly gasped and looked at me as if I'd just drop-kicked her puppy. "Did you just assault me?" "You're joking," I said. I actually laughed. "Karen, you need a hobby." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police. Right now." "Great," I said, pointing up to the security camera mounted under the eave of my roof. "Make sure you smile for the camera when you lie to them." "I have witnesses," she said, voice shaking with faux victim energy. "No, Karen," I said, already turning back inside. "You have delusions." But she did it. She called. I could hear her outside, fake sobbing into the phone, telling some poor dispatcher that I had physically threatened her and she feared for her life. I swear, if she could have produced crocodile tears on command, she'd be in Hollywood instead of terrorizing suburban mailboxes. I went inside, locked the door, sat down at my kitchen table, and poured myself a drink. Not because I was afraid. I wasn't. Not even close. I had that interaction on camera, audio, and video. I had 3 years' worth of documentation on her nonsense. But I knew what was coming. I knew her type. The kind that doesn't need facts, just a badge-shaped void in their soul and a clipboard to swing like a sword. My phone buzzed. Notification, motion detected in front yard. I checked the feed. She was still there, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk like a Disney villain whose curse didn't stick. She looked up at the camera, then at the house, and then she smirked. That smirk didn't sit right. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something much darker. She wasn't just going to knock on my door anymore, she was going to kick it down. I didn't expect them to show up that fast. Maybe it was 20 minutes, maybe 30, enough time to finish my drink and stare out the window while Karen paced the sidewalk like a chihuahua on Red Bull. When the black and white pulled up, she went full Broadway. Arms flailing, voice raised, she rushed to greet them like a grieving widow, pointing at my house like it was ground zero for war crimes. 2 officers stepped out. One was stocky, mid-40s with that "I've seen some things" face. The other was younger, taller, built like a football player, sunglasses still on despite the shade. It was the tall one who walked up my porch first. Nameplate said, "Officer R. Clevenger." The other trailed behind, looking mildly uncomfortable. "Mr. Bennett?" the tall one asked. I opened the door slowly, hands visible, calm. "Yeah, you here for the Karen show?" He didn't smile. Step outside for me." I stepped out. "Before you say anything, I have the whole incident on my security camera. I didn't touch her, didn't even get close." "Sir, we received a report of physical assault," he said, placing a hand on his belt, right near the cuffs. "You're being placed under arrest pending investigation." "Hold up," I said, raising my eyebrows. "You haven't even looked at the footage." The older cop, nameplate Sanders, shifted slightly. "You'll have the opportunity to present that later. Right now, we need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." "Am I being charged with something?" I asked, voice flat but rising. "Second-degree assault," Clevenger replied. "Now turn around." "That's a felony," I snapped. "On her word alone? Without a damn shred of evidence." "She has bruises consistent with being grabbed," Sanders added, sounding like he hated that he had to say it. "Bullshit," I muttered, stepping back toward my door. "That camera's been running since 9 a.m. You want to accuse me of something, go check the footage. It's all there. Unless someone's got a reason not to." That's when Clevenger moved fast. Too fast. He grabbed my wrist, twisted it behind my back, and slammed the cuffs on tight enough that I winced. "We're not going to argue law on your porch." My neighbors were watching. Of course they were. You get arrested on your own porch in the suburbs. It's like throwing a barbecue. Everyone shows up. No one brings beer. I locked eyes with the Hendersons across the street. They quickly turned away. Cowards. Karen, meanwhile, stood on the curb with a look of pure righteous satisfaction on her face. She wasn't smirking now. No, this was something deeper. Serene. Like she'd just pulled off the perfect con and the curtain was about to drop. As I was escorted down my own walkway in handcuffs, she called out in her sweetest, fakest voice, "Maybe now you'll learn some manners, Mike." I didn't say a word. I didn't even look at her, but I did glance up at my camera. It was still there. The little red light still blinked, still recording. That gave me a sliver of comfort. The ride to the station was quiet. I asked again to speak to a lawyer. They said I'd get my call at processing. I asked them to at least preserve the security footage before anyone tampered with it. Clevenger told me that wasn't his job. Once at the station, they booked me like I was some kind of drunk frat boy. Fingerprints, mugshot, shoelaces out, belt off. The holding cell was cold and reeked of bleach and mildew. I sat on the metal bench, trying to make sense of the fact that I was now officially being held on a felony assault charge for an incident that not only never happened but had actual video proof to the contrary. I asked again about making a statement. Officer Sanders looked like he might actually give a damn but said it was above his pay grade. The next blow came hard. I was denied bail. Flight risk due to combative behavior at the time of arrest. Combative? I asked for a video to be checked. They told me I'd be held for 15 days while the case was evaluated. 15 days. For something that never happened. For breathing the same air as Karen. The worst part? That camera, still hanging on my house. I had no way to get to the footage. I didn't even know if it was still there. Back in my cell, I leaned back against the concrete wall, staring up at the flickering ceiling light, and realized the hard truth. I wasn't just up against a lying neighbor. I was up against a system that didn't care about truth unless you beat it over the head with it. And Karen knew it. I didn't know what was happening outside my house at that moment. All I had was a concrete bench, a flickering fluorescent light, and the kind of silence that makes your thoughts start pacing like nervous animals in a cage. But later, when the dust hadn't settled yet, when everything was still raw and burning, I was told exactly how it went down. And when I pieced it together, it made my stomach knot in a way cold jail food never could. It happened the same evening I was booked. Rick Jordan, the guy who lived directly across the street from me, had just gotten back from a day trip out of town. Rick wasn't much of a talker usually, but he had a sixth sense for drama. He pulled into his driveway, killed the engine, and saw them. 3 figures near my front yard. Karen, 2 men he didn't recognize, and one of them, according to Rick, dressed like he'd walked out of a low-budget hacker convention. Black utility vest, messenger bag, too many gadgets clipped to his belt for someone who looked that annoyed with technology. Karen was pointing up at my house, at the camera mounted under the eave. The man with the bag was already stepping onto my lawn. Rick said his first thought wasn't even anger, it was confusion, because he knew, everyone in that block knew, that Karen and I had about as friendly a relationship as a bear and a bee. So, he walked out of his driveway and called out, "What the hell are you doing on his property?" Karen turned like she'd been waiting for an audience. "Good evening, Rick," she said, syrupy and smug. "We're handling a security issue." One of the guys stepped closer to the house. The expert opened his bag, pulled out tools like he was about to defuse a bomb instead of touch a camera the size of a coffee mug. Rick said his spine stiffened immediately. What kind of security issue requires you trespassing on someone else's land while he's in police custody? Karen didn't flinch. Tom asked us to take care of his camera, she replied. He wants it moved. It violates neighborhood privacy concerns. Rick told me his eyebrows nearly launched off his face. Tom asked you to touch his camera. You two hate each other. Her smile sharpened. He realized his mistake today. That's when Rick pulled out his phone and started recording. He didn't say anything, just hit record. The so-called security expert started walking toward the camera with a small telescopic ladder. Rick followed, still filming. You licensed? Rick asked. The guy didn't even look at him. Just doing my job. What company? Private contractor, he replied, which apparently is code for trust me because I said so. Rick zoomed in on his face, then on the tools, then on Karen. That's when she realized what he was doing. You can't record this, she snapped. Try stopping me, he replied. She stepped closer, voice lowering. Rick, this doesn't concern you. Funny, he said, since it's happening in front of my car and on my neighbor's lawn. The fake expert was halfway up the ladder now, hand on the camera. That's when Rick stepped forward, raised his phone higher, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You touch his camera and I'm calling the police for trespassing and tampering with private property." Karen shifted fast, like a switch flipped. Tom gave us written permission. He has mental instability issues. The officers took him in for aggressive behavior. Rick later admitted that was the moment he really felt something was deeply wrong, because the words didn't sound like concern. They sounded rehearsed. He told her to show the permission. She couldn't. Then she made the mistake. She lunged for his phone. Rick said her nails actually scraped his knuckles as she tried to grab it, like some deranged suburban raccoon. He yanked it back just in time, but the video caught everything. Her hand, her face, her voice. He called the police right in front of her. Karen stepped back immediately, putting on her public face again. The expert suddenly climbed down like he'd left the stove on. The second guy moved toward his car. No more bravado, no more authority. When the patrol car pulled up, not the same officers from my arrest, Karen suddenly had a whole new narrative. She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood from illegal surveillance. She claimed the man with her was a certified digital security consultant. She claimed I had invited her to help before my arrest. Rick didn't argue. He just played them the video. The officers looked at it, then at her, then at the ladder still leaning against my house. They made her leave. No more performance, no more authority. But Rick didn't stop there. He waited until they were gone, walked up to my house, looked at the camera still hanging there, took a deep breath, and he did something most people wouldn't. He grabbed a ladder, carefully unscrewed the camera himself, pulled the micro SD card out of it, and sealed it in a small plastic case from his car. Not to destroy evidence, to save it. They didn't even give me a phone call until the next morning. By then, I'd spent the night on a steel bench with a paper-thin blanket and a roommate who snored like a cement mixer full of gravel. I wasn't angry. Not yet. That came later. I was too stunned for anger. Too busy replaying the moment on my porch when the cuffs went on, trying to process how fast the world could turn upside down on nothing but a lie. When I finally sat down across from the public defender, a woman named Michelle Reyes, I could tell right away she was stretched thin, tired eyes, quick questions, and a pen that never stopped moving. "They're charging you with second-degree assault," she said flatly. "Karen Montgomery alleges you grabbed her wrist, twisted it, and threatened physical harm." "That never happened," I said. "There's a camera right above the porch. Caught the whole thing. Clear as day." "Where's the footage?" she asked. "Still mounted to my house unless someone's already tampered with it." She scribbled something. "You'll be arraigned this afternoon. Depending on the judge, we might be able to argue for release on recognizance." "No bail?" I asked. She looked up. "There's a recommendation from the arresting officer that you be held. He described your behavior as combative and uncooperative." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it broke through the shock. I asked them to check the damn camera. That's combative now. Apparently, the arraignment was a joke. The prosecution made a show of concern for community safety and highlighted Karen's long-standing involvement in neighborhood affairs. I was portrayed as a man with documented hostility toward the HOA and a history of confrontational behavior. They even brought up the time I told Karen to take her clipboard and shove it into a compost pile. That apparently counted as character evidence now. No one asked about the camera. Judge denied bail, said I'd be held pending further review of evidence. 15 days. 15 days for something I didn't do. They took my shoelaces again, like I was a danger to myself now. Back in holding, Michelle came to see me 3 days in. She looked different, sharper, like she'd finally slept. And she had news. Your neighbor, Rick Jordan, she said, flipping open a manila folder, brought in the footage. I sat forward, pulse kicking up. He has it. He had it in his possession, removed the SD card himself. He also filmed Karen attempting to access the camera with 2 men, one of whom she described as a digital security contractor. Yeah, I muttered. That part's real comforting. She continued. We reviewed the porch footage. You never touched her. You didn't even move toward her. In fact, it's clear she stepped into your personal space and you verbally asked her to leave. So what now? Well, the footage was submitted to the precinct. Here's where it gets interesting. It sat for over 24 hours without being entered into the case log. Someone tried to bury it. I blinked. Let me guess. Officer Clevenger? She didn't answer, which told me everything I needed to know. Michelle leaned forward, her voice dropping. There's going to be an internal review. But the moment the video hit the DA's office, everything changed. The charges won't be dropped yet, but a formal investigation into the arrest has been opened. That's when she smiled. Small, but real. And the footage is damning, not just the porch video. Rick's phone caught Karen claiming you gave her permission to access your property. On camera, she tried to take his phone. That's attempted theft at minimum. Please tell me someone's actually watching this crap. They're watching now. 2 days later, I was moved to a smaller holding unit with a working toilet and actual hot meals. It was still a cage, but it didn't smell like despair and bleach. Michelle told me I might be out early. The judge had requested a special review hearing in 72 hours. Meanwhile, Rick had gone full commando. Not only did he submit the footage, he filed a formal trespassing report against Karen and both of her sidekicks, claimed damage to his property too. She scratched his truck while trying to yank his phone. I imagined her reaction, the righteous indignation, the sputtering disbelief that someone actually pushed back, that someone dared to treat her like a criminal. But she wasn't just a nuisance now. She was a liar, a trespasser, and soon, hopefully, a felon. I spent the next few days in a haze of stale air and plastic trays, counting the hours until the review hearing. There wasn't much to do except wait and hope that someone outside still believed in facts. The review hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in a quiet courtroom with more echo than warmth. I stood beside Michelle, dressed in the same beige jail-issued clothes I'd been wearing for nearly 2 weeks. My wrists itched where the cuffs had rubbed raw. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and stale paper. But none of that mattered the moment the judge leaned forward and said, "Let's talk about the footage." For the first time since the porch, I felt the weight of someone taking this seriously. Michelle laid it out with the precision of a surgeon. She submitted the porch camera footage, time-stamped and uninterrupted, showing me standing still while Karen theatrically recoiled like I'd thrown a punch. The courtroom was silent as it played. No audio manipulation, no missing frames. Just the raw truth. Then came Rick's video, Karen insisting that I had asked her to retrieve the camera despite knowing full well that I was in police custody and had never in my entire life spoken a kind word to her. She tried to grab Rick's phone visible on camera. One of the men with her, the so-called security expert, can be heard saying, "Let's just take the damn thing and go." When the video ended, the judge adjusted her glasses and said nothing for a full 10 seconds. Then, the court finds this evidence materially significant. The defendant is hereby released pending further investigation. Charges will remain suspended but inactive. It wasn't a full exoneration, not yet. But it was sunlight through the storm clouds. I walked out of that courtroom, a free man, escorted by Michelle and followed by 2 local reporters already sniffing around the case. I didn't say a word to them, but I did catch a glimpse of Karen in the hallway. She was seated on a bench next to a man in a navy blazer, her lawyer, I assumed. She looked smaller than I remembered, not in size but in posture. That same woman who once barked orders at teenagers for using the wrong mailbox flag now sat folded in on herself, watching the system she manipulated start to crumble around her. Michelle nudged me. "Don't look at her. Let the facts do the work." I took her advice. But I also took notes. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind. Internal Affairs launched a formal inquiry into Officer Clevenger. His body cam footage, or lack thereof, became a key issue. According to his report, his camera malfunctioned during my arrest, but tech analysts reviewing the footage logs discovered something curious. The camera had been manually deactivated less than 10 minutes after his shift began, which meant it didn't malfunction. He shut it off. I was called in to give a formal statement. This time, it wasn't in a holding cell. It was in a proper interview room with coffee, not cuffs. I explained the history with Karen, the camera, the arrest, and how everything unfolded. Meanwhile, Michelle uncovered even more. Turns out, Officer Clevenger had a connection to Karen beyond the HOA newsletters and neighborhood picnics. Her husband, Mark Montgomery, was a former deputy chief with the same department, retired just 2 years ago, still played golf with the precinct captain, and guess who helped Clevenger get his last promotion? I didn't need a chalkboard to connect the dots. Then came the bombshell. The expert Karen brought to my house. His name was Alan Richter, claimed to be a certified cybersecurity consultant. His LinkedIn profile was impressive until you looked closer. His certifications were expired. His license had been revoked 5 years ago for falsifying records in a case involving surveillance tampering. Even better, he had worked for a short time as a subcontractor for a firm that did HOA digital installations. Michelle wasted no time. She drafted formal complaints to the state licensing board, the bar association for Karen's lawyer, who had apparently tried to suppress Rick's video in early hearings, and filed a request for perjury charges against Karen. Meanwhile, Karen kept changing her story. First, she said I grabbed her. Then she said I lunged aggressively. Then she claimed she felt a threatening presence and acted on instinct. In the next breath, she said I whispered something deeply disturbing that made her fear for her life, though she couldn't recall what it was. The transcripts read like rejected Lifetime scripts. By the end of the week, everything was unraveling. Internal Affairs suspended Officer Clevenger pending outcome of their investigation. Alan Richter received a cease and desist from the licensing board and was being subpoenaed. Karen? She was formally charged with filing a false police report and attempting to destroy digital evidence. Her HOA presidency was temporarily vacated pending review, which was code for she was screwed. I spent the next few days in my own home, staring up at the eaves of my porch, the spot where the camera once hung. Rick had returned it to me, the SD card still intact. I mounted a new one, better angle, higher resolution, cloud-based backup this time. Let them try something now. By the time the trial date was set, the town had already picked sides. Half of Spring Ridge pretended like they'd never heard of Karen Montgomery. The other half whispered behind closed blinds, terrified that if they spoke too loud, they'd be next. HOA politics had turned into full-blown courtroom drama, and for once, I wasn't the one with my back to the wall. It started with the preliminary hearings, but the real storm broke in the main trial, held in the county courthouse with full media attendance. A row of cameras lined the sidewalk like vultures on a fence. Someone even held a handmade sign outside the doors. Free the Porch Man. Not exactly Pulitzer-worthy, but it made me chuckle. Karen arrived in a gray suit, pearl earrings, and a look like someone had just slapped her coffee out of her hand. Her legal team, 2 attorneys from a mid-tier firm that specialized in HOA defense, looked rattled before we even began. I couldn't blame them. Their client wasn't just accused of filing a false report anymore. She was facing obstruction of justice, conspiracy to tamper with digital evidence, and civil liability for defamation. Michelle took lead for our side. She came in calm, focused, and surgical. I'd never been in a courtroom this serious before, but watching her move was like watching a surgeon dissect lies in real time. The prosecution opened with the porch footage. They didn't narrate it, just played it. Full screen, no edits. The moment where I raised my hand, palm out like a damn traffic cop, and Karen recoiled like I'd stabbed her. The audio clear. Please get off my property. That was it. That was the whole assault. Then came Rick's video. Karen on my lawn. Karen saying I gave her permission. Karen lunging for Rick's phone. Her voice shrill and desperate as she realized she was being recorded. Karen's lawyer objected, tried to paint Rick as biased due to personal friendship. Michelle hit back hard. Friendship isn't bias. Evidence is evidence. Then she introduced the kicker, the metadata. Both videos matched, time-stamped, untampered, reviewed by a digital forensics expert with no ties to the case. Next came the witness list. Rick testified first, calm, confident, walked the jury through the events. When asked why he intervened, he looked straight at Karen and said, "Because I don't like bullies, especially the kind that smile when they lie." It got a reaction from the jury. Subtle, but real. I watched Karen shrink 2 inches in her chair. Then came the tech expert. Clean cut, with a resume longer than most medical textbooks. He confirmed the SD card hadn't been altered, explained how cloud backups worked, and casually mentioned that the security consultant Karen hired had 0 active certifications and an expired business license. That was the moment the courtroom shifted. Karen's lawyer asked for a recess. Denied. The real fun started with Officer Clevenger's testimony. He walked in stiff, trying to keep it together. Michelle didn't let him. She laid out the body cam logs, the manual shutoff, the timestamp that showed it was deactivated 8 minutes before my arrest. Then she pulled up emails between him and Mark Montgomery, Karen's husband, from 2 weeks prior. "Looking forward to helping your wife with the neighborhood issue. Tell her to call if things get spicy." Clevenger looked like he was about to puke in the witness box. When asked directly if he'd colluded with Karen to falsify an arrest, he invoked the 5th. That didn't help him. It just made him look guiltier. Then came Karen's turn on the stand. She was a wreck. She changed her story 3 times in 10 minutes. Claimed I made a sudden move, then said I threatened her with words, then claimed she feared for her safety due to my known hostility. When Michelle asked why she told Rick I had authorized her to retrieve the camera, Karen stammered, "He misunderstood." Michelle played the recording again. "Tom asked me to change it. He said it was broken. I'm helping." The jury didn't need convincing after that. Final statements were short. The judge found Karen guilty on 2 felony counts, filing a false police report and obstruction of justice. She also received civil liability for defamation and unlawful entry. The sentence, 12 months probation, 500 hours of community service, and a personal financial judgment. She was ordered to pay me $95,000, $50,000 for emotional distress, $25,000 for legal expenses, $20,000 in punitive damages. The HOA itself was hit with a separate sanction. An investigation into mismanagement under Karen's leadership revealed that she had redirected funds for community improvement projects that somehow all ended up at her own house. New kitchen, new landscaping, even a home security system she had billed as HOA perimeter integrity. They were fined $25,000 and placed under temporary county receivership for the next 18 months. Karen was permanently banned from holding any board or administrative position in a registered HOA. Officer Clevenger, he was terminated immediately, lost pension, lost his state law enforcement license. A separate criminal investigation was pending against him for evidence suppression and abuse of authority. As for the so-called expert, Alan Richter, he was charged with fraudulent representation, unlawful entry, and was blacklisted by the state licensing board. 10-year ban from working in any regulated digital services. When the gavel came down, it felt final, not just legally, spiritually. Like justice had finally stopped clearing its throat and decided to speak in full sentences. I walked out of that courthouse with a clean record and a settlement check. But the best part, Karen had to walk past every camera crew on her way out, and not a single one of them looked at her like a victim. 3 days after the verdict, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, watching a bluebird land on the railing like the universe was offering me some poetic nonsense. I hated poetry, but I was learning to appreciate silence again, the kind that wasn't pierced by Karen's shrill voice or the hum of legal anxiety buzzing through my skull, the kind that felt like a beginning, not a warning. The check from the court had cleared. $95,000 sat in my account like a monument to restraint. I could have bought a new car, could have flown somewhere warm and sandy. Instead, I upgraded my home surveillance system until it looked like NORAD had subcontracted my roofline. 4 cameras, all cloud-synced, with redundant storage and tamper alerts. I even bought a solar-powered backup just to spite Karen's crusade against visual disruption. But the money wasn't the part that mattered most. What mattered was that people were finally talking. Rick was the one who pushed me to go public. He showed up the day after court with 2 cups of coffee and a look that said, "You're not done yet." "You should write something," he said, sitting on my porch like he owned it. People need to know what she tried to pull. What the HOA let happen, what the cops almost buried. I'm not a writer, I replied. You don't have to be. You're pissed. That's good enough. So I wrote. It started as a long Facebook post, turned into a blog entry. Then Michelle, ever the strategist, suggested we send it to the local news outlet, the Clearbrook Herald. They picked it up under the headline, I was arrested on my porch for a crime I didn't commit because the HOA president lied. It went viral in a day. I don't mean 30 comments and a few shares viral, I mean national forums, Reddit threads, HOA horror story compilations, podcasts requested interviews. One local news station drove out just to film a segment on abuse of authority in suburban governance. My porch became a symbol, not of defiance, but of exposure. The story hit a nerve. People wrote in from all over. My HOA threatened to sue me for planting tomatoes. I got fined for having a wind chime. They towed my car from my own driveway. Apparently, Karen wasn't a virus. She was part of a species. Then came the letters. First, a polite inquiry from the State Civil Liberties Commission. They wanted to interview me about my experience with unlawful arrest and HOA harassment. I gave them everything. Names, dates, footage. They opened a public report and started tracking similar abuses across the state. Next, the City Council invited me to a hearing on community governance oversight. I stood there in front of 6 uncomfortable-looking officials and told them flat out, if Karen had succeeded, I'd be in jail right now. And the only thing that saved me was a neighbor with a phone and a camera that didn't get ripped off the wall. They passed a motion 2 weeks later to review the scope of HOA enforcement powers countywide. They even launched a hotline for reporting abuses of power by HOA boards. They named it after the case. The Bennett Line. I'm not joking. Karen, meanwhile, vanished. Not literally. She still lived 2 blocks over, but her lawn started growing wild. Her mailbox disappeared. No more clipboard patrols. No more HOA newsletters. She'd been voted out, banned from holding any community position, and, most importantly, stripped of her voice. But she wasn't done entirely. About a week after the article hit national circulation, I got a letter in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was tight and furious. You humiliated me. You lied. This isn't over. She even underlined the word you 3 times. I showed it to Michelle. She laughed. Keep it, frame it. Evidence and decoration, all in one. We reported it anyway. A quiet warning went into the system. Nothing came of it. But it was nice to know that for once she was the one being watched. By the end of the month, I had received a Community Impact Award from the Clearbrook Legal Alliance. Rick gave a short speech about standing up for truth, but mostly roasted Karen's clipboard complex. The room loved it. At home, I finally reinstalled the old porch camera. Not because I needed it anymore, because I wanted her to know. The eye was still open. There's a strange kind of quiet that follows a war. Not the celebratory kind, not even relief. More like the stillness after a storm when everything's soaked, broken branches are scattered across the yard, and the sky pretends it never lost its mind. That's what life felt like after the trial. After the press, after the name Karen Montgomery stopped echoing through every corner of my block like a bad joke on repeat. No more HOA emails, no more clipboard checks, no more passive-aggressive newsletters about lawn edging and mailbox paint tones. It was almost eerie, like someone flipped the HOA's master switch and all the noise just stopped. The neighborhood changed. Some of it was immediate. The temporary receivership installed a neutral administrator who actually listened to people. The fines were frozen. Hearings had real transparency. Several board members resigned quietly, and one even stopped by my house with a 6-pack of craft beer and an apology that smelled like fear more than guilt. But the real shift wasn't in policy, it was in people. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to started waving. Rick, of course, was a constant, my unofficial PR manager, lawn beer partner, and reminder that sometimes all it takes is one decent person with a phone to burn down a lie. One Saturday, a woman named Emily, who lived 2 streets over, stopped by with her teenage daughter. She said her kid wanted to thank me. Apparently, Karen had once berated her for skateboarding too loudly. The daughter handed me a handmade thank you card with stick figures. Mine was holding a sign that said, "Truth wins." Karen's stick figure was falling into a trash can labeled lies. I kept it on the fridge. I got used to being that guy. The one who stood up. The one who fought back. But the truth is, I didn't want any of it. I didn't wake up one day hoping to be some cautionary tale about HOA tyranny or false arrests. I just wanted to be left the hell alone. Still, the aftermath had momentum. The Civil Liberties Commission released their full report, citing my case in the executive summary. 3 new regulations were proposed at the state level to restrict HOA overreach and require external audits every 2 years. They even included provisions for independent ombudsmen to handle resident complaints. The Bennett Clause, they called it, language that would protect homeowners from being targeted based on non-membership status. I didn't attend the state vote. Michelle did. She texted me when it passed. "It's law now. You changed something real." For a while, I didn't feel much. Just tired. Then, one late afternoon, I stood on my newly repainted porch. Same color, just glossier because screw Karen, and I watched the sun dip behind the rooftops. The shadows crawled like slow-moving ink across the picket fences, across my lawn, across the spot where I was arrested. The camera above me blinked red once. Recording, still watching. I took a long sip from my drink and exhaled. Maybe this was peace. Or maybe it was just intermission between disasters. But for the first time in years, no one told me what I could or couldn't do with my own damn property. No one tried to climb my porch without permission. No one accused me of crimes I didn't commit. Karen? Last I heard, she'd moved to Florida. Of course she did. That was always her spiritual homeland, the final destination for people who think the rules were made for someone else. Someone said she tried to join another HOA board down there and got rejected. I smiled when I heard that. I never answered her letter. Didn't need to. The facts had already done the job. And facts, as she learned, don't bend to HOA bylaws. They bite back.